of what the series of women in religion is going to be focusing on. So, um, I thought it'd be really awesome for us to have a series of events where we discuss women and their contributions to different faiths and spiritualities across the world, and throughout history. So this is just the first of many for this series. If you go to our website under the events, you can see we have a couple planned out for the next few months as well. Um, but today we're going to talk about some of the most influential saints that are female in the Catholic Church, as well as a couple who are maybe lesser known and deserve a little bit more recognition. So I have a little bit of a presentation here, so let me go ahead and share my screen. Alrighty. Alrighty. So um, we're going to start by kind of clarifying what is a saint. So in the Catholic Church, saints are holy people. They're people who are examples of faith. They act as spiritual guides and mentors. So when people get confirmed in the Catholic Church, they typically choose a patron saint, which is somebody that each individual identifies with, and they find that they can, it's kind of like having a friend. So you ask, hey, will you pray for me? It's kind of like doing that with saints. It's asking them to pray for you and to kind of give more power to the prayer. And I wanted to clarify this as well, veneration versus worship. So I think that a lot of times the Catholic faith is often misunderstood in regards to people thinking that Mary and the saints are worshipped in Catholic faith, but in reality, it's veneration. So veneration is more of basically respecting, and like a lot of cultures will do veneration of their ancestors and things of that nature. So that's what's done with the saints versus worship only being given to God alone in the Catholic faith. So just wanted to lay that foundation as well. Right. And we're going to watch this little video to explain the canonization process, which is basically how do people become saints? Alrighty, so basically through that, it's just explaining the process. I thought it'd be nice to lay the foundation of that. Um, 1 second, I'm trying to figure out how to get back to the presentation. 1 second, I'm gonna go back to it. All right, I'm sharing my screen again. All right, so now that we know what a saint is and we know how it works in regards to how people become a saint, here are the 5 different prominent saints that we're going to talk about today. And all of them have their own unique story and different, the diversity of the array of female saints in the church. So, Saint Natalia, she was born in Poland. She was one of the 108 martyrs of World War II. So she did a lot in regards to volunteering as a nurse and just different spiritual assistance during World War II. And she also led some underground education missions. So just making sure that even though, Nazi Germany was trying to eliminate discussion of the Catholic faith and even discriminating against Catholics, she was underground, working against that to promote the faith. And she is best known for on 1945's Good Friday. She basically delivered this, I don't want to call it a sermon because it wasn't a sermon, basically a big speech about Christ's passion and resurrection before she was murdered at a concentration camp. And so she's somebody who kind of shows the effect that World War II had on people of the Catholic faith and just um, the way in which women were involved with spreading the faith and making a difference during World War II as well. And Saint Cecilia, a lot of people have heard of her because a lot of music rooms at different Catholic churches are named after her. She's known as the patron saint of music. So she was born in Italy, and it explains there why she's the saint of music. But she actually was known for her ability to convert people, specifically her husband. And then she gave away all of her belongings. And this was something that she's also known for is helping the poor and donating and that selflessness. And she was martyred because during that time in the Roman Empire, they were trying to make people who are Christians go back to the different forms of paganism. So she's known as somebody who defied that and also played a role in music for the church. And then St. Elizabeth Ann Seton. I actually, yesterday, I was in Maryland, so I stopped by where she's from. And I went to the basilica that has some of her relics in it. But she was the first American to become a saint. And she played a huge role in the early development of the Catholic Church in the United States. She actually was not Catholic originally. She's always been a Christian. But her husband died in Italy, and then she became a Catholic because of the Catholic nuns that were there helping her. And she started a bunch of schools, and she's most prominently known just for being the first saint from the United States. So pretty cool. And if you ever go to Maryland to Emmitsburg, you can visit the basilica and go to her shrine, which is really, really cool. Saint Antona Ebo. And so she's known as one of the saints that really made a difference during the civil rights movement. And I thought it was really awesome when I was doing my research that to kind of see the impact that she made and just wondering why I had never heard about her before I started doing my research. And she did a lot in regards to not only the civil rights movement, but in regards to medical accessibility. And she was involved with social justice movements and making a lot of change and pushing progress for the church. And then we have Saint Mariana of Jesus Paredes. And she was a saint that was from South America, and she was known to help in times of epidemics or a lot of global environmental disasters. And so I wanted to include her because I thought it was really cool, her story and how she basically, it was said that praying to her during some time or praying asking her to pray and intercede allowed some different earthquakes and things that were happening in Ecuador to be stopped before it was able to harm a lot of people. And she's also the patron saint of Ecuador. So some of the common themes of the lives of these saints is purity and virginity, faith and piety, war and peace, change and progress. And this is something we see across not just in the Catholic faith, but in faiths of all faiths, is that women kind of embody these themes. So I thought it was really interesting to include this just because I think as we go through this Women in Religion series, we'll see the common themes such as these that women are expected to embody in order to actually play a huge role in the church or in any faith. Yeah, and that's the presentation. If anybody has any questions, we can go from there, or if anybody has any stories to share about, if anybody has any, want to share their patron saint or anything like that, feel free. And you can turn your mics on for this part. Sorry, I thought somebody had turned their mic on, but I didn't hear anything, so I wasn't sure if somebody's trying to ask a question or not. So that it kind of was like a shorter presentation than I expected it to last, but essentially the series Women in Religion, we're really just trying to highlight the different contributions that women make to the interfaith discussion. And the next one we have coming up is in July, and Fatima, who's here, her daughter's going to be there, and then we have another special guest, Fatima's friend, will be talking about veiling in Islam, because it's something that I feel like is there's misconceptions about it. Like, why do women have to wear a hijab? So we'll do different topics like that, but did you have anything to add, Fatima, about that? Oh, your mic's not on, Fatima.
Yeah. Thank you everybody for being here. So we really, appreciate it. This is our new program director. It's not new anymore. She has been here for a while now, and we are so proud of her doing a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we're gonna have the series, and we're gonna have a program about women in Islam, because women in Islam is there is a lot of misconception and misunderstanding about why women, for example, in Islam, there is no saint. If there is something to relate to the program today, even the person who leads the prayers, or we call him imam, he can't, he's not holy, or he has to be a man, number one. Women can't be in a religious leadership. This is very traditional, and the way the Islam is still practiced until now, since the Prophet time. She can run the business, for example, the board or something, but leading the prayers or being the person like we call the imam, who help the people with the religious issues and idea, and give them ideas and explain to them, it's always men. This is the way it is in Islam. But women, it does not mean it's not women is second class or anything, but it's just Islam is very traditional, has not been changed since back then. So there is no saint in Islam. That's even the person who's imam, he's not holy or anything. He's just a person. It happened to be leading the prayers or being there for people when they need help. That's it.
It's really interesting you bring up the leadership roles aspect, because another one of the events we're doing, I can't remember if I think it's actually in July as well. It's a Women in Religion event, but we're having 2 female priests come in and talk about what it's like to be a woman who's a priest, and kind of navigating the role, but also navigating the people who may oppose them being a leader as a woman. So yeah, I think that with the saints, it was interesting because like I grew up Catholic, but I no longer identify as Catholic, but I still, have a lot of connection to it just because of my culture being Italian. But yeah, I was really excited to host this event. I feel kind of bad that it didn't last as long as I was expecting though.
No, it's great. But yeah, Becky, yeah. She
Yeah, I have a comment to make. A lot of Italian saints, there are many, many Italian saints. And really, for the longest time, there were just, European saints. The martyrs, the early martyrs were a great big group. And, you had to be like a virgin, and that's one great breakthrough with Elizabeth Seton, who had like a number of children, I don't know, 6 or 7 children. And also there's money involved, so that was left out of the busted halo presentation. But there is money involved. And so I know a lot of Jesuit, there are a lot of Jesuit saints because of money. The Jesuit priests had a little bit more money than maybe the Franciscans had. So I read this whole book about Elizabeth Seton's process of becoming a saint, and it was grueling. I mean, people were against her becoming a saint because she was a woman, I guess.
Or maybe married, or
Yeah, she didn't fit the kind of box that was expected, and she also wasn't very wealthy either. I highly recommend it. Literally, if you guys ever are going to like Gettysburg or anything, it's like 20 minutes from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. It was super cool. They had the shrine for her in the basilica. I went to a mass there. It was really cool. And they have like, of course, like the relics, which are relics for saints, for any of you who may not know, are basically like body parts of the saints that like sometimes they have like their body like in the church. So, and that's when they call it a basilica.
Or it could be a piece of cloth that has touched the saint. And I always like, I don't know, always wondered about that, It's commercialized also, a lot of it. But the point is that they are to be emulated. I mean, some of their lives are just extraordinary. And many of them have come from a noble background, or, they started out in a noble family, having a lot of money and, giving away to the poor and serving the poor. That's one of the marks, I think, that are very important in their lives.
Thank you for adding to that, Becky.
Could I add something?
Of course.
Okay. I think another saint that wasn't mentioned, because there are so many, but you did mention War and Peace as being one of the themes. And Dorothy Day was very much against World War II. And she was considered to be a weirdo, and everything by people in the 40s, 30s, because she was so radical in her pacifist views. And so she was very significant, I think, for a 20th century saint. And one other thing, I wish that when the Catholic Church canonizes, that they would allow the laity to be part of that decision, because the people who knew Elizabeth Ann Seton and knew how her lives touched them, to me, is much more significant than someone off in Rome, who just heard about her or whatnot. And I think it's the people that surrounded her. Of course, maybe some of them have died by the time she's canonized. That's probably true. But in any event, the people who have lived with her and were even the poor among the ones she served, they knew for certain she was holy and very worthy of honor. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I think that's really important to note too, because it's one of the biggest criticisms of the Catholic Church is just kind of that hierarchy and that not
Yes.
elitist, but almost elitist kind of energy. Like,
Mhm.
and another criticism that's part of the Catholic Church, for example, is confession. So, like, why do you have to go confess to a priest when you could just pray to God?
Yeah.
Just different things like that that are interesting, and there are explanations for them in the in the like in the Catholic faith, in the catechism and everything. There's explanations, but I do think it makes an issue of accessibility, and it makes it difficult for like everyday people to have access to the faith or to be recognized, and so it is a little bit elitist for sure.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
the Paulist priests have were on a roll at one time. I think it was during the 70s or 80s. It was definitely the 80s or 90s. Yeah, 80s or 90s. They made two significant movies about saints, and one was Dorothy Day, and it's called Entertaining Angels. And if you ever want to learn more about her, she's one of my mentors. You could watch that film called Entertaining Angels, and also one on Oscar Romero, who was Archbishop in El Salvador.
Right.
And there's a lot of controversy around Oscar Romero's canonization, not in my circle, the people I run with, but many very conservative people in the Catholic Church kind of have issues with him as being too political. And that's another thing about the church's judgment on some of these modern saints. They want to say that they're too political, like the Berrigan brothers, for instance, or
And yet, who has the courage of those people? Who could stand up and say they weren't courageous? And Romero gave his life. I mean, he was so truth speaking to the powers that be. He spoke the truth, and it cost him his life. And I don't understand how people cannot see that as, as valiant, and but there will always be those that feel that the church shouldn't be political when Jesus was the most political leader in the world.
right.
I'm so glad you just said that. I was just turning my video on to say, who could have been more political than Jesus in the
Yes.
temple?
Right.
Right.
Thank you.
No,
Well,
he
he
would literally
witnessed-
be flipping tables.
Yeah, he was super radical.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that there's a lot of people who kind of hide behind that mask of like what I like to call American Christianity, where it's like conservative to like the extent that they don't, like, when it comes to the politics, they don't want to talk about it, and then just kind of staying in their little bubble rather than breaking out and speaking up against issues. So it's become, I actually think it's become a little politicized in a way, to where it's like, if you don't support these things, then you're not really a Catholic, or you're not really a Christian, or whatever it might be. And getting away from what actually Jesus was in the Bible. Like, one of the biggest things today, like you said, Becky, is a lot of the church is about money, money, money. And I remember the Bible verse where Jesus is like, It's easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to get to heaven.
Yeah.
And just
Right.
things like that. If you were to like go to any like average like one of those preachers with the huge mansions and stuff and say that, you'd be called a radical. But that's what Jesus would say.
Yes.
And that's the thing about Pope Francis that I so admire is that, he's trying to break through all that, all
Yes.
the
Yes.
clericalism and the hierarchy. But that's he's just beginning. He's just like cracking through the surface. It's
Right.
going to take a long time to drive all that out.
Yep.
And there are so many moneyed forces that are mocking him and not taking him seriously, and
Yes.
yeah, giving him a hard time. But
U.S. bishops in particular.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's unfortunate. It's so
It
unfortunate.
is.
It's so disappointing and heartbreaking.
Yes.
And there is the other thing about the Catholic institution that we'll actually be discussing in another event later in this month, is the idea of how colonization impacted
Yeah.
people who had their own practices and beliefs, but then were converted to Catholicism or Christianity and like Protestantism. And we have two guests that are going to be talking because they identify as Catholic witches, which when people hear that, they're like, excuse me? Like, what do you mean Catholic witches? So we're having them on June 28th. It's going to be another virtual event, but they have a podcast called The Red Text. And they're going to talk about how they grew up Catholic, but upon like their journeys of self-discovery and kind of looking into their ancestry, they connected to some of the practices of their ancestors, combining it and kind of like making this their own unique practice of combining folk magic with Catholicism, and how that's like a way of them decolonizing themselves while also maintaining their faith. So it's going to be pretty cool. If you guys are interested in all of that, you should definitely join. It's on June 28th. The event's called Witchcraft and Catholicism, and it'll be really cool because there's just a lot of misconceptions about like what that topic would entail, and I think it'll be really cool to allow them the opportunity to talk about that, because that is one thing that a lot of people haven't acknowledged in terms of Christianity and Catholicism and colonization is how it's impacted them. So
Yes.
Well, thank you for doing this, first of all.
Yes.
I mean, this is a topic that needs to be shared. So bless you.
thank you. It's going to be exciting. I'm excited that all of you guys came today. I'm sorry it wasn't longer, but I'll have this recording up. It'll be on our YouTube channel and then in the next few days. And then everybody that's in our list that RSVP to this event, I'll send you the link to the other event I mentioned as well, and to the Veiling in Islam event, just so you have it. But otherwise, I think we're all set, and I appreciate you guys coming today. It was so nice to talk to all of you.
Thank you so much.